There are people who have been here for more than 100 days. They keep on coming and coming and coming. What do you think will make them go home, besides force? What kind of concessions from Georgian Dream will make them go home and say, okay, we trust you now?
Justice and nothing else. And it's possible to achieve only through new elections. Because, the main and most important achievement of this protest is there is no domestic legitimacy for this government. There is no international legitimacy for this government. And people understand that we need new elections, free, fair, competitive elections to bring this country back on the right track of democracy.
What do you hope to achieve by coming here night after night?
We want new elections and we want democracy to be in Georgia.
What is the one thing you want the most out of being here in front of Parliament?
We just really want freedom.
The reality is that Georgia is not going to the west or south or any direction. What we are trying to do, especially during the last 3 years with the Ukraine war, is to survive.
We see everything.
Can you see it?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Gakharia, do you miss being Prime Minister?
No. Even more, I can tell you that it looks like that from opposition perspective, it's much more interesting support your country and your citizens, especially now when we see how behavior of ruling party moves country from European dimension toward South Caucasus dimension. So
what does that mean?
It means that, we, for decades, not only me, but the generations of this country were fighting to bring this country from South Caucasus context to the Eastern European context.
So when you say that sort of Caucasus perspective of politics, okay, so let's define it. The European one being checks and balances and not using politics as a vehicle to enrich yourself and all of that. And the Caucasus one being what?
Post-Soviet. Unfortunately, it's very difficult for post-Soviet countries to solve this legacy. Even if you take a look not only on Georgia, but different post-Soviet countries, even changes of elites, it's happening it's very slowly. That's why the standing and values of youth and new generation protesting every day, Tbilisi or Rustaveli Street, and acting politicians is completely different. Maybe they are not conflicting, but they are different. So that's why I think the mission of these generations of politicians is to connect this country through Black Sea with Eastern Europe. And I think for this, is very good momentum, and this is why we are fighting for.
When I say Makhashvili, is that
It's perfect.
Yeah?
Perfect.
does
Yeah.
that sound like a Georgian?
Yeah. No, seriously.
Make the connection between your age and the fact that a lot of the protesters are young. Asking, do you understand them? Do you understand where they're coming from?
Rolling.
Okay.
No, rolling. Rolling.
What's interesting is behind you we have the Georgian flag and the EU flag, and you're that sort of point person between this government and the European Union, aspirations towards NATO, the EU, at a time when the accusations are that Georgian dream and this government is taking the country in the opposite direction, looking further east or northeast towards the Russians. How do you respond to that?
First of all, good to have you in the Parliament of Georgia. It's my pleasure to be with you in this interview. Well, we have seen a lot of accusations, allegations, perceptions throughout the years, but the reality is different. The fact is that it was this government that signed or that achieved everything that we are proud of now this time with the European Union. Everything from the association agreement to visa-free access to the Schengen zone, and the perspective of the EU membership and the candidate country status of Georgia with the European Union. So, on the one hand, you will see a lot of perceptions, but on the other hand, the fact is different. And the fact is what I told you, whatever Georgia is proud of today, everybody, critical to government or not critical, if somebody is proud of anything, it was under this government that Georgia achieved all these things.
Earlier you said the geopolitics are sensitive, that it's important for Georgia as a small country to have good relations with all of its neighbors. Let me try and get into the government's mindset a little bit. Maybe they're trying to be careful so that what happened to Ukraine does not happen to Georgia, that it's trying to balance interests between the West and Russia. As you said, not making an enemy of anybody. Could that maybe be the intention for why they're not fully pro-Western? They're trying to maintain some sort of balance so that they don't open themselves up to destruction.
Yes, you're right, but not being fully pro-Western and being anti-Western, this is a completely different
Are
story.
they anti-Western?
Of course. When, for example, I can bring to your attention when you, as a Georgian government, are blaming Western countries, United States, as well as European Union, member states, in willing political will to open the second line of war against Russia in Georgia. Or when you are accusing your strategic partners, the United States as well as European Union, in will to preparation of coup d'etat in the country, of course, it means that you are not anymore for balanced policy approach. You are blaming someone in being your enemy, or someone not naming, because you have to understand that the Georgian government understands, and they are very much afraid to name Russia as a friend.
The reality is that Georgia is not going to the west or south or any direction. What we are trying to do, especially during the last 3 years with the Ukraine war, is to survive. That's basically our internal and external policy, to survive.
So you're trying to be pragmatic to survive.
Indeed, we are trying to be pragmatic, cautious, and rational, because we have seen this movie. Whatever is happening in Ukraine, it may be eye-opening or wake-up call for many in Europe or wherever, but for us, we have seen this. We saw it in 2008, we saw it in early 1990s, and even more. This is a tragic déjà vu for us, as we say, what is happening in Ukraine. We saw the beginning of this in 2008, we saw the continuation, and we saw the ending of this. What is happening now, it's a tragic déjà vu. We have our own Irpins and Buchas and Mariupols here in Georgia, in Gagra, Tamarasheni. We have seen it. And just because we've seen it, we saw how these things ended in Georgia. That's why we are trying to be very cautious, because we are a small country, and when we see that the world is changing in this very powerful geopolitical shifts, we just want to survive. And in order to survive, you have to be very cautious. You have to draw the lessons from the history, and look ahead in future with that optimism, but careful optimism, so to say. You have to what we are trying to do is to avoid that we are a pawn on this chess board, so to say, and that somebody may sacrifice us for nothing.
Do you believe that Russia has corrupted this government?
Of course.
So you were prime minister for 2 years, interior minister before that as well. Can you tell me if they tried to corrupt you directly?
No.
How does it work? How does Russian
I can
influence
explain it.
work
I
on
can-
this
I can- I
government?
can
You were
explain.
there. so-
Everything about corruption started after Ukrainian war because there was a space to corrupt this government through avoiding the sanctions imposed on Russia. This was the key.
Why push through the foreign agents bill and law, which effectively shows a hand that internally the country is going to be run more closely to Russia than the Europeans?
That question has been asked many times. And first of all, even the question is about perceptions or allegations, because this is not called foreign agent law. When the drama started, and whatever we have now, the law is called the transparency of foreign influence. Only now, this year, we initiated the exact copy-paste of the FARA, US Foreign Agent Registration Act. And that process is just a culmination of a lot of things going on in this country throughout the last years.
But is it only a coincidence that it happens to be Western organizations, and you're making a similar argument that Russia makes about NGOs trying to influence or infiltrate Russia? I mean, if I look at your prime minister's comments about the global war party and George Soros and these liberal values trying to undermine the society, we can see that it seems to be a position that's very similar to Russia's position towards the West. That's what the protesters out there are saying. They're saying this is a Russia law because it's not only about the mechanics of the law, but it's also about the intentions towards preventing Western influence in the country.
Look, nobody is full here. Of course, we understand what are the powers going around this country because of, and we were frank as much as we could, because a lot of information is still confidential. We don't say it publicly, but just the service, state security service across this building, they are working on that. We are not naive, obviously. When you live in this region, when you have big powers around you, and they have all sorts of interests, political, economic, religious, cultural, all sorts of interests. Of course, there are many interests. State-level organizations or actors, or non-state actors who are trying to influence this country. And obviously, we have that information from here and there. But the biggest problem that we saw on a political level throughout the years was exactly that, on a party level, so to say, and a political level in Georgia, certain non-state actors trying to become members of the political arena, political game, without any transparency. And when somebody is demanding certain civil society organization to be with you in the decision making, not just to be with you across the table, but to have a decisive say, then at least what they should do is to publicize who are behind them.
what I understand, and I'm going to be speaking more to the protesters, it's you're looking for a sort of hidden hand and a ghost in the machine, in the fog of,
We can talk about that.
or no transparency from the West when, as you said, we've seen this movie before, it conveniently aligns with the country that is actually occupying 20% of your own country. You know, you've said, we've seen this movie before. So you're conveniently ignoring the enemy that has already attacked you and occupies your land while looking for other enemies on the other
That's
side.
not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
All the time when for example, the head of state security service comes in the parliament for the parliamentary supervision, the first thing that he says when he starts his the speech is that Russia is a country that occupies this country, and Russia is number first country threat for this country because of the occupation and all the related challenges and problems that are related to the occupation. And we understand these threats, we see these threats, but all we are saying is that we are not, coming and screaming and hey, this and that. Threats are there, and we are working on that. And when you're talking about this hidden hand, as you say it, I mean, and you mentioned also Global War Party, as we call this informal powers, so to say. I mean, you can call whatever you want. I mean, generally speaking, it's just a catchy word to describe everything and everybody that we're pushing Georgia through or to the escalation with Russia. And I'll tell you very briefly, and especially nowadays, it's becoming very obvious. Throughout the last at least 3 years when the war started, we were pressurized consistently from this and that. I mean, names changed, names of countries or powers, they changed. Consistently pressurized us to do something that was a direct ticket to the military escalation with Russia. At least economic collapse for this country, at least by imposing economic sanctions with Russia, and that was, was systematically in the European Parliament resolutions and systematically in these parliamentary rooms during 3 years, demanding imposition of sanctions, closing air and land and everything, and plus a very high risk of direct military escalation with Russia. And what it was, as I said, we've seen this as well, how we started the escalation of sanctions. Before the war in Ukraine, Georgia was the most sanctioned country in the world from Russia. The most sanctioned, so we know what it means. And that's what we are saying. And throughout these years, these geopolitical changes that we have, we were asked, demanded, pressurized all the time. And again, I mean, we can already say it loudly because Prime Minister also said it, the chairman of the parliament also said it. I also participated in those parliamentary meetings. We remember how US ambassador was coming here, pressurizing to do this and that, to send the volunteers, to send that. So that was a direct ticket to the war that we are trying to avoid throughout these years.
And you don't want them to push you to fight wars on their behalf. And I get it. When the European Parliament comes out and says they feel there needs to be a rerun of the elections because it seems to be irregular, does that embarrass you as a Georgian politician?
For me, as one Georgian politician with pretty deep knowledge the country's current situation, for me, much more important is how to link this country with Europe, with Eastern European dimension. This is for me is a priority number one. Elections is priority number two. And of course, when we are talking about elections, we always have to remember about illegally arrested people jailed by this government only for protesting, for peaceful protest. That's why if you're asking me, my list of priorities for this very moment, keeping in mind the development in geopolitics, especially in Europe, for me the priority number one is how to keep door of European membership for this country open. Only after the new elections and everything else. Because when we are talking about these countries, European perspective, at the same time, for me, it means security guarantees. It will determine the decades of this country.
It must be awkward now meeting with your European partners, given that they've questioned the very legitimacy of the election that put this government in power in the latest mandate. European Parliament saying there should be a rerun of the election. Ursula von der Leyen saying huge irregularities. They were speaking about ballot stuffing, intimidation, beating people up. How are those meetings? Tell me how it's going with them.
It's going, I mean, with whoever I have meetings on my level, it's going very well. But that's not the important point. The important point is that there was a clear desire from certain forces, including from the European Union, to topple this government because they didn't like GD. GD did not do, Georgian Dream. Georgian Dream did not do whatever they wanted when war started in Ukraine, and that's what we got as a bonus, so to say. So, they were always demanding before the elections that OSCE ODIHR report, electoral monitoring report, electoral observation report, for them also would have been like a textbook, and they would follow that. Then elections happened, and voila, ODIHR report was absolutely different. It did not give them clear solution or clear conclusion that something was wrong in a way that the election should be rerun. And then they started, you know what, we don't care about OSCE ODIHR report, it is European Parliament, this and that. And again, as I said, we are not naive, we are not fools, we are not children here, and this is not a kindergarten game. We know what was happening throughout at least 3 years. We know what this game is about. And again, we are always saying after these elections as well, we all are interested to close this election chapter as soon as possible. But for that, European Union and others as well, they have to come to their minds, so to common sense, so to say. And if they really want to have some say in this region, if they want to have some say in Georgia, if they want to remain as a normal, with normal reputation, then they should come to common sense, so to say, and not all these personal dramas and everything, but whatever it's needed from the European Union as a strategic actor.
Very finally, I'm going to speak with some protesters. Give me one line for them. I can tell them that parliamentarian Levan Makhashvili has a message for them. What's that one line to them?
Well, probably I would not be the only one to say this. Prime Minister consistently or insisted for quite some time. If they want to discuss anything that they are concerned, some of them could be really frank about their concerns. If there is anything, Prime Minister, government, Parliament is ready to meet them and to discuss everything in detail.
It seems as if the decision has been made to do whatever it takes to deter them. So, for example, people wear masks, they cover their faces because they don't want to be fined. These are crazy numbers that they have to pay if they get fined through facial recognition software. Help me understand the mind of the government. What does it tell you that they're issuing such heavy-handed fines on people who are just showing up sometimes, just showing up to the protests?
It's very difficult, especially when you several years ago was a part of all this story. it's very difficult. Unfortunately, looks like that the examination by power is very complicated and difficult, and that's I think was failed by Ivanishvili and ruling party, and that's why they are paying any price, even price to violate against your citizens, peaceful protesters, aiming only one, somehow to stay in power. And this is a difference in values. So when you have only one goal, somehow to stay in power, looks like that it determines all kind of your behavior. That's why I'm afraid, and I'm very much concerned that it's very difficult to predict what will be the behavior of this government. That's why the people are standing here. We are protecting each other.